All righty. I think that should be sufficient. Let me just make you host, Beverly.
Thank you.
All right. Now permit me to do my opening spiel here. Hi, everyone. My name is Gavin Fromey. I am a graduate assistant working with the teaching support team at the Center for Teaching, Research, and Learning. On behalf of CTRL, I want to welcome you to this session, The Value of Adjunct Faculty Mentoring, Reflecting on Best Practices. Before we get started, I wanted to mention a few things. Captioning is available for this session. To turn on captions, there should be an option at the bottom of the screen in the Zoom toolbar that says Show Subtitles. If you do not see it, you may need to click on the More to see that option. There will be a brief Q&A portion at the end of the session during which you can use the raise hand function or type questions into the chat box. Our CTRL facilitators are happy to pose the questions on your behalf. And finally, there will be an anonymous survey posted at the end of the session as a QR code that you can scan with your phone, as well as a link in the chat. CTRL appreciates any feedback because it helps us improve our programming and helps us better support AU faculty. With that being said, I will turn it over to our presenters. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Gavin. Just pulling up the PowerPoint. Welcome to our conference panel, The Value of Adjunct Faculty Mentoring, Reflecting on Best Practices. We are happy to have you here today so that we can share our collective experiences and have a discussion that will help us to learn from each other so that we can create an environment where our adjunct faculty thrive. This panel came together after a lot of discussion. The Office of Graduate and Professional Studies recently transitioned from the School of Professional and Extended Studies, as many of you might know. And as part of this reorganization, we took a second look at our internal processes and how we onboard and mentor adjunct faculty. Anna sent the call for proposals for Ann Farron, and I started talking with this about Dean Boland, and we thought it was a really important conversation for us to have. Two things. We thought that it would be important for us to have several schools and programs represented, both face-to-face and online, so that we can learn from each other's experiences. And secondly, we thought that it would be vital to hear from our adjunct faculty on what they need and what worked and what did not work for them. And we're hoping today that we've created that environment where the adjunct faculty can tell us what we're doing right and where it is that we might need to put some little bit more effort into preparing and supporting our adjunct faculty. So that's where we are today. We have 3 teams here, one from the Office of Graduate and Professional Studies, COGOD, and CAS. Each team will tell us about its programs, how it approaches adjunct onboarding and ongoing mentoring, and what support was helpful to new adjunct faculty. I'll start off with the Office of Graduate and Professional Studies. We have 4 completely online master's programs in evaluation, healthcare, human resources, and sports analytics. Our students are adult learners. They're mid-career professionals who look to their academic practitioner faculty for teaching, for mentorship. We have 4 full-time program director faculty and around 50 adjunct faculty who together teach several sections of about 25 classes. We have 3 official starts throughout the year and bring on between 1 and 5 new faculty per start period. Our adjunct faculty are practitioners. That's the hallmark of our programs. Students want to learn with practitioners in their fields. Oh, sorry. How did that happen? Many of our faculty come into our programs without a long-standing history in teaching, and many have not taught online before. The nature of our adjunct faculty, practitioner faculty hits us in the face today, as one of our faculty from OGPS is not able to meet with us. Natalie Donahue works for the Department of State, and the new assistant secretary called a meeting, and she frantically called me a few minutes ago and said, "I'm so sorry," but I told her that's all right. She might try to pop in towards the close of that other meeting, but she sends her apologies. Anyway, we work with Wiley, and our courses are already built in an LMS called Engage. Our faculty are not creating courses, but they are teaching courses that other faculty have already created, so much like some of the other online programs on campus. We have general onboarding procedures in place in the unit. We have 2 faculty support positions that help with HR processes, getting email access, and other administrative support. We have both a faculty handbook and a checklist, which talk to teaching in the program. I uploaded these documents, or I asked that these documents be uploaded into the session portal, so you should be able to get access to those. These documents provide some practices for teaching in the program. Some of it's high level around the pedagogy of online learning, how you can get students engaged in the online classroom, how to start discussions, how to manage the online classroom. And some of it is pretty nitty gritty, like how you might plan your week, how to write announcements, how you deal with incompletes, and other classroom management issues. We have found that having this the handbook and the checklist are really helpful for faculty, as they provide some guidelines for them. As this is an online program, faculty must also learn the technology of the LMS system. We have self-paced courses and videos that faculty can use to help learn the technology. We also enroll faculty in the QA of their courses prior to the start of the semester, so that they can familiarize themselves with the content. But really important to onboarding and ongoing mentoring in OGPS is the role of the program director as a mentor. Ultimately, we have 4 full-time program directors who each oversee about 6 courses in their fields of expertise, where they help to onboard faculty and engage in ongoing mentoring to help set them up for success. And that is largely the issue that we'll be talking about, or the OGPS faculty will be talking about in the next slide. So can I hand it over to you, Nicole?
Sure. Thank you. I appreciate everybody's time today, and it's a great topic because we're all here, and there are many adjuncts that are brought in on a regular basis. So just giving you a little bit about my experience. When I was hired by American last year, I had been teaching online at various institutions for about 6 years already. However, my American experience was kind of like the perfect storm for adjuncts. I have to call it that because there was onboarding with the new school, there was learning a new online platform. It was new to me. A course that, teaching a course that was new to me, teaching a course that I didn't create, and then teaching a course with multiple sections taught by multiple instructors who also hadn't taught the course before. So there were all of these things happening at the same time, and it could seem a little overwhelming. However, I have to say that, some of the onboarding components that were already discussed, that really helped with the basics around the institution and the platform. But I think teaching a course that I didn't create was really the biggest challenge. The components that American provided helped to bridge that quite a bit. I'd say the syllabus that was already in place they're extremely informative. They're some of the most extensive syllabi I've ever seen, but having all of the rubrics in one place and having all of the expectations for students right out front. I mean, that was easy to follow, and knowing what the students were expecting was helpful. Then the comprehensive checklist from each week that summarized tasks and assignments, and that was like the Cliff Notes version. So it was really, again, a great overview of what to expect going into a new course. The online resources in the platform were easy to find and they were organized. And even the instructor who created the course had templates for the weekly videos to serve as a guide and help those of us who are new know what to emphasize each week and what some of the challenges the students might be facing at that point in the course. So that was extremely helpful to have as a place to start. So I'd say these resources help understand the structure of the course, but also expectations for me new to the course. Once the course started, however, that's when the questions popped up. And, you know, I had a number of questions, but I know my peers that are on the call also probably are laughing because they know how many emails I was sending at random times during the day. But questions about assignments, questions about scoring criteria, because being consistent with the other instructors was really critical, making sure that, you know, those of us who were new were really understanding and interpreting things the same way, given our different experiences with teaching and or, you know, being a practitioner. So the next piece that's on the bullet here about the peer network, I think that peer networking was critical when you had multiple instructors. And for me, I'd love it if it was more formalized. I'd say if that was my only feedback there, because I felt like I had a lot of questions and I didn't want to be bothering people at all times of the day as I was. So that would be, you know, my only, you know, suggestion for improvement. But I think all of the resources were super helpful, and my colleagues who were teaching the course at that time were fantastic. And I think I see Blanca is on the call here, and I think you had some thoughts about the networking and some of the peer components.
Right. Just like Nicole mentioned, it was really helpful to have sort of this informal peer network, particularly the group of folks that were teaching the same course, because we were able to sort of troubleshoot together and identify some common challenges in the course, things that the students were struggling with, and maybe even ideas on how to provide additional support. So it was really helpful to us as instructors, but also I think helpful ultimately to students, because it helped prepare us better and identify additional supports. Meeting with the designer, which was also part of sort of our informal listserv, was also very helpful to kind of understand the goals of the course and why things were kind of planned out the way that they were. So even though we didn't design the course that we were teaching, we got really good insight about it. And again, like Nicole said, having her as part of the network and having her share a lot of her notes was really helpful for us as instructors, but also just to make sure that we were consistent across all of the sections. And some of the questions that we kind of shared amongst the group were specific to the course, and some were just, you know, just kind of handling logistics as well. So it was really nice and handy to have people to kind of, that you can easily reach out to. So that sense of community, I think, made it a lot easier for us to be able to just kind of come into AU. It was my first time teaching at AU as well. And so that really facilitated sort of this transition to American University. And as part of the systems set in place to support us, in addition to this informal network, we had very specific connections. We were given very specific connections and points of contacts so that we could get additional support that was more formalized within the university, including the technical support, because this was a new system for most of us that we hadn't used before. Some of the technical components and getting that out of the way and having someone to help troubleshoot, for example, how to provide feedback to students in the way that they could see it automatically and easily. things like that, you know, we weren't necessarily familiar with before. So it was nice to have that structure in place, that formal structure in place, to be able to connect with the university and get that kind of support. I can go on to some of the other navigating AUs, or if someone else wants to jump in. It was helpful when, as part of the onboarding process, to get the point people. Here are the, you know, here's the Beverly who can help sort of as your mentor, but then here's also the folks who help provide support to students. So if you notice that there's an issue or concern that you want to bring up, there are folks at the university who already have those connections with the students. And so we knew who to connect with and say, hey, can you check on this student? I'm kind of concerned they haven't showed up. They haven't been, you know, turning in their assignments for the last 2 weeks. And they're not returning emails. I'm just concerned. So they already have someone in place as a formal, you know, structure at AU that can help troubleshoot with that as well.
I think it was Rory's first time teaching also. I think we all came in brand new at the same time. So that was kind of helpful to have all of us at that same thing. Rory, did you have some of those same thoughts that we had?
Yeah, I would just echo everything that Nicole and Blanca have both shared. And I think really kudos to Beverly and other folks at AU for these, what are really, I think, layers of support. I admit some skepticism to, you know, this more asynchronous and really distributed model, but it's been really incredible to me, both the support that Beverly provided, the meeting with the course designer to really understand sort of the philosophical underpinnings of what the course we were teaching, at least in the fall, was really aiming to accomplish. And then on the student support side, I just can't speak highly enough of, you know, the resources that are available to say like, hey, I'm noticing that this student, you know, is struggling a little bit. How can we put our heads together quickly over email to problem solve? And the knowledge of what's going on in many of these students' lives, particularly at a time when I think, whether it's in academic professional settings, the world is requiring a lot of emotional intelligence of all of us. And so, you know, just the ability to sort of say like, actually, like this student is not an email person, like text them. Okay. Problem solved and crisis averted, which I think, again, speaks really highly to AU. And then again, yeah, just those layers of support were really incredible to making it a really fantastic and supported experience from the adjunct side.
Let me just pop in and say we have a fabulous associate director in Jessica Bancroft. And I don't think she's on the call today, but she knows every student, she knows what's happening, and she is a huge student support for all of our students in our programs. Yeah, we only have a couple of more bullet points. You want to just wrap those up, Rory, and then we can move on to the next.
I feel like we've covered most of these, Bev, but go ahead and jump in on ones that might feel like particularly, I mean, I just feel like if any of these things came up, like issues potentially with even like plagiarism, there were resources in place, both from that more kind of informal adjunct network, as well as for Beverly to sort of say like quickly and easily, like, here's how we need to address the issue. Nicole or Blanca or Beverly, you want to jump in there?
I think that things were pretty laid out for students, and for many students, it wasn't their first course. So sometimes they knew the drill before we knew the drill. So I think they were a great support network to each other. And just like we had that connection and that ability to speak formally and informally, the way the courses were set up for students to work together and to have those discussions, it helped, I think, us as new instructors get to know the students a lot better in such a short amount of time. And, you know, the 8-week courses go by fast. So it's helpful to really get a sense of the student needs as soon as we can. And, you know, having those elements built into the courses in advance, I think accelerated that for us.
Great. Well, I think that's what we have from OGPS. We can move on to our next slide. with CAS.
Everyone, thanks for joining us today. I'm Lacey Wootton, and I direct the Writing Studies program, which is the first year writing program here at AU, along with some other courses. If you teach undergraduates and they talk about the W1 and the W2 requirements, we kind of cover the W1 requirements as well as some other things. So basically, virtually every first year student at the university comes through our classes. And then a number of transfer students too. So we are, kind of affecting almost all of our undergraduate population at some point. So to do that, we offer a lot of sections of college writing courses. We have about 30 adjunct faculty teaching college writing each semester. It usually doesn't go under 30, it can be up to 35. We also have about 35 term faculty. So it's about half term and half adjunct faculty. In the fall, we usually will end up with about 5 to 10 new adjunct faculty. It all depends on enrollments and whether people leave. Spring, the numbers are lower. It can be as few as 2, it might be as many as 5, but we get fewer new faculty for our spring courses. It tends to be pretty stable from fall semester to spring semester. So I do the hiring of our adjunct faculty. I'm the direct supervisor for the adjunct faculty. When we hire them, each new adjunct faculty member is assigned a term faculty mentor for their first year. We have a mentoring committee, and they handle those assignments. They handle the coordination of that, but everybody gets a mentor for their first year. Our adjunct faculty tend to come in with a range of experience. I generally don't hire anybody if they haven't taught before. They have to have taught at least for a year of first year writing. And then we get some people who are very experienced too. So it is quite a range, but they're all new to AU. And so there's always an adjustment there no matter what. So after that mentor is assigned, the mentor and I both review their syllabus. We both visit their class. We don't have a set syllabus. We don't have a set curriculum. We do have learning outcomes. And then we do have expectations for our courses. They have to teach academic writing and research. Somebody can't come in and teach creative writing or literary studies. It needs to be an academic writing and research course. And so we review the syllabi to make sure that it's clear, that it's effective, to also make sure that it's in line with our expectations for how this course is taught. The class visits for both the mentor and for me really are mentoring and supportive in nature, even though I'm their supervisor, and as part of the collective bargaining agreement, adjunct faculty are required to be observed. And so it is part of that evaluative component. For that very first visit that they get from me, I always tell them, this is not for evaluation. This is for support, for me to get to know your teaching and get to work with you a little bit about how your course and how your teaching is sort of aligning with the practices of the Writing Studies program. I do, just as a side note, I do observe them later if they're with us for 3 years and we need to reappoint them, again, per the CBA, I need to go in and observe them again and give them feedback, because that's part of what the bargaining agreement requires. So we keep that first initial visiting and review very much in a mentoring capacity. We also have, as a program, we have a SharePoint site that's really extensive. This is something the full-time faculty have put together. It has sample syllabi, it has assignment sheets, the learning outcomes are on there, required syllabus language, and a whole bunch of other resources. And as soon as we've hired somebody, we give them access to that site. And they clearly use it. I can see, when I look at their syllabi, I can see the language in there that they've picked up. I can see the influences that they've gotten from their new colleagues. We also, as in a less required way, we do things like teaching roundtables, other faculty development. We encourage adjunct faculty to participate in the program. We have monthly programmatic meetings. We invite the adjunct faculty to come. but we do not require them to come. Our term faculty are required to come. Adjunct faculty, though, we do all we can to make them feel welcome, to make them feel part of the faculty, because one thing that sort of sets my teeth on edge is when adjunct faculty are not treated as faculty, and this happens. And so we want to do everything we can to make them feel part of the faculty, because they are. So they're always welcome, but we do not require them. We also give them opportunities if they want to serve on committees. If they want to do that, absolutely, we want them to be there. That is never a requirement for them. So my kind of bottom line philosophy for working with our adjunct faculty is pretty basic. If AU is not going to support adjunct faculty materially, which they do not, our faculty are not the high paid adjunct faculty that you occasionally see. They are the very low paid adjunct faculty with few benefits. I figure then the least I can do is support their development as teachers, as professionals, so that they have options to go off and frankly get a better job. Our program is wonderful to work with, but everybody needs healthcare and everybody needs a living wage. So I see a lot of our purpose as certainly serving our students, giving them the best education possible, but also serving our adjunct faculty and giving them the best professional development that I possibly can, and really help them in their ongoing career path. So one of our adjunct faculty who has become a term faculty member in the program is Jeremy Wade, and he's going to talk about his experiences in the program. So Beverly, can you forward to the next slide, please?
Thank you. Yeah, I wanted to add to I wanted to add my experience with that with the programmatic mentorship that Lacey was talking about. And I started teaching at AU and benefited from that mentorship in my very first year. And then I left the area and taught elsewhere and later came back. So it was almost night and day. I think the other schools that I taught at, it was kind of like, you seem to know what you're doing. There's not a problem. That was kind of it. And so early in my teaching career, I felt that I wasn't gaining expertise, that I wasn't innovating, that I wasn't making the sort of progress that I wanted to make. And in fact, I would, with the SharePoint site that that Lacey mentioned, the previous iteration of that, I still had access to it. So a lot of times I was getting stuff still from that AU mentorship, even though I wasn't there. And it was an easy decision to come back when I came back to the DC area. But for me, Lacey talked about, the compensation issues, right? And so it was difficult for me to justify the expense of a conference, right, on adjunct money. And I think that as much as I would try to be proactive and do research to better my teaching practice, I felt like I was out there on my own. And so when I came back to AU, and when there's an assigned mentor and there's the teaching roundtables that our program's mentoring committee puts on, that was huge for me, because it allowed me to sort of not just be on my own and trying to interpret the literature in our field, to try to innovate, to try to get feedback on my course materials. And it's good to hear those different voices all the time. I mentioned those teaching roundtables that the committee puts, and I'm a part of that mentoring committee now. They are great, but for me, the real payoff comes almost afterwards. Like, I'll get inspired in those teaching roundtables and start to put something to work in my syllabus or other course materials. But the payoff is when I'm able to talk with my mentor or my colleagues and get feedback on how it's actually playing out in my class, get that individual's thing that there's not always the time for in a group activity. I also feel like I've been able to take more risk, or to try to innovate, or really focus on some of the things that are important to me, like anti-racist pedagogy, or like right now, linguistic diversity is a priority for me. So I've been engaging my mentor and others in the program too. But I also kind of feel like, as much as Lacey, I'm comfortable with Lacey, there's always a power dynamic, right? And so when I was an adjunct and I was going through the application process to become full-time faculty, you want to look good in front of your boss, right? And I think that what helps is sort of having somebody who you can talk to as like a peer, right? Like you can take those sort of risk and not be afraid that you're going to be, you know, sort of mess up your public image, right? It's very much like that one-on-one. You feel free to talk about it. You feel free to show materials in their early stages. And I like getting both of those things. I get the benefit of Lacey's expertise. I got that as an adjunct through the class observations, feedback on course materials. But at earlier stages, I was working with my mentor like before it got there, and that was nice. And also, you know, it's program directing seems like a hard job. So it was nice to have somebody who a part of their service, a part of the terms of their employment was to spend that time with me. And I think most people in our program go above and beyond, which really helps too. The other thing that I try to bring to my mentoring now is I felt like as an adjunct, every minute that I spent doing something that wasn't designing a course in the materials or teaching that course was uncompensated labor, right? And I wanted to be as efficient as possible, either because I'm working other jobs or because like you don't want a part-time job to be a full-time job. And I think that some of those outside class concerns, like navigating campus, like knowing the collective bargaining agreement, right? Those are the things that I think that this sort of mentorship can really help with, right? So when somebody's new, they're trying to get their course ready to start, right? As soon as they're hired, they're not reading a collective bargaining agreement, right? Or, you know, or maybe they didn't know that they were eligible for good faith consideration or something like that. And so I think that those relationships, like building those relationships within our program, in my view, that's what's helped me. That's the things that I think I have to offer as a mentor now. But that's all I have. Lacey, do you have anything to add to that, or?
I guess one thing I would add very, very quickly is when I send a welcome letter to all our new adjunct faculty, and one of the things I have on there is a link to the collective bargaining agreement. Mm-hmm. I'm often surprised at how few adjunct faculty are aware of it at all. I'm also surprised at how few full-time faculty have ever looked at the faculty manual, which is basically our contractual terms of labor. But, you know, yes, I want them to read that stuff. And even though I'm technically management, you know, I want them to be able to advocate for themselves and know their rights and protect themselves in the university. So I think, yeah, communicating things like the Adjunct Fund, which Beverly just put in the chat too, information about that. People who are new to the university, it's not fair to expect them just to happen upon this stuff, right? You know, we want to be communicating all this information to them. Yes, absolutely. Beverly, I think we're ready to move on.
Okay, thank you. Hello, everyone. My name is Anjali Varma, and I am an adjunct professor in the Kogod School of Business. I will be talking a little bit about the adjunct perspective for our in-person classes. And then we have Laura, who will be talking about the online process. And I have been fortunate enough to have been an adjunct since fall of 2019, and I have taught a number of different types of classes. And I think it's kind of important to understand the different types of classes that we have in the in-person environment in order to then understand maybe some of the recommendations that we can make to enhance the adjunct experience. So we have classes that are taught across sections, which I know have been mentioned in other departments. So core classes where there is a course coordinator and you are teaching the same course across many different sections. And I have taught a course that's been extremely organized, where, you know, the PowerPoints have been given to me, the exam has been given to me, we have weekly meetings, and then I've also taught a coordinated class where there is a coordinator, but they're much less involved, and it really is on the adjunct to kind of go with it how they want to. So depending on your personality and how comfortable you are with teaching, those can be two different experiences. And then I've also had the opportunity, there's also classes that are more one-off, where it might be a course that an adjunct is taking over from just one professor, where typically that professor is pretty engaged in kind of providing what they've done in the past and, you know, giving insight as to what will happen in the future for this adjunct. And then I've also had the chance, which is a little more rare, to build a class kind of from the ground up with a colleague. And what we just hosted a Women in Organization Leadership class, which we're going to be teaching again this semester. Very exciting. And so that has a little bit less structure, right? And so that is really building something I didn't even know what went into a learning outcome. I took that for granted. I didn't realize all that course designers did, all the different elements that go into a syllabus. These are all things that as an adjunct, you may not understand unless you really are going in and building the syllabus kind of from the ground up. So I think kind of understanding those different classes helps to kind of then frame, recommendations that would be appropriate. If you don't mind going to the next slide, Beverly. I think I had a chance to speak with many of my colleagues to kind of understand what they would like to see as far as improvements and things that have really worked well for us at KOGAD in the in-person environment. And a lot of these have been we've spoken about, so I'll go quickly through, but I do think, again, before jumping into kind of what's worked and what could work better, it's really important to understand the perspective of the adjunct, because I think, as Lacey mentioned, many term faculty, many that have kind of been entrenched in the academic environment, don't necessarily, understand or think about kind of the adjunct perspective. So for most adjuncts, they have full-time employment outside of AU. They're working 40 plus hours, right? Doing many other things. And they've decided to take this on because they want to give back most of the time, because as has also been mentioned, which is very important, I think, to mention, compensation is extremely limited for adjuncts. Whether that is an opportunity to, be enhanced, who knows, but I think it's important to kind of bring to the conversation. And so many of these people, adjuncts are devoting their time because they want to give back, but they do have full-time employment. And most of us maybe didn't realize the time commitment that goes into teaching a class. So I think when polling my colleagues, they would say it's anywhere from 7 hours a week to 10 plus. And I think 10 plus is being generous. But when you put in at least the 3 hours of the class, plus prepping for the class, plus getting to school, and then, as Jeremy mentioned, all of the other administrative stuff that goes in, that you really feel like that limited compensation, that is when it becomes taxing, right? Is when you're doing a lot of this administrative work that maybe you didn't understand was part of the job originally. And most of these adjuncts are subject matter experts. They really have the real world experience. They're in the trenches, as Beverly mentioned. And so they are bringing a different perspective. However, oftentimes we haven't been in the academic environment. So terms like pedagogy, accommodations, these are things that maybe we aren't as familiar with, right? And so putting together a syllabus or a presentation or assignments when you've only had the perspective as a student, not necessarily as an instructor, can be challenging. And then finally, what many adjuncts find is that they do kind of operate in a vacuum. So maybe they do have a course coordinator, but otherwise you really have minimal interaction with other faculty and other adjuncts, unless you kind of go out and try to create that, which I had the opportunity with core courses. I found that our adjuncts have been great at kind of cross-pollinating, as others have mentioned. But at least for us business instructors, we teach our students to network. And kind of in the business world, we are continually looking for additional networking opportunities. So I think, as adjuncts, we are hoping to kind of get that opportunity as well. So if you can go to the next slide, based on those considerations and the types of classes, we have a few recommendations that I've kind of come up with based on not only my experience, but again, with other colleagues, adjunct colleagues. I think for KOGAD, I think it's great to hear what other schools are doing. And I think there's so much opportunity for us all to learn from one another. So I think for us to have a more formal onboarding process, knowing that every adjunct is kind of getting the same toolbox that some of you are doing, I think would be really helpful, regardless of the course, knowing that everyone is having that same onboarding experience, orientation. Again, time is limited, so we don't want anything too crazy, but having video tutorials, maybe to do some of these administrative duties that really are secondhand nature to professors who have done this over and over. But for a new adjunct coming in, I mean, Canvas has been a nightmare for me, right? And there are so many resources out there. I think that's the other thing. There's like 1,000,001 videos. There are people that you can go to, but when you have limited time, just knowing exactly what you need to do in that moment, or maybe having somebody to do it for you, would be invaluable, I think, for an adjunct. And some of these other tasks that I just kind of came up with here, approving timesheets, submitting final grades. There's all these little nuances and quirks that you have to do for that. So maybe having video tutorials and formal onboarding process. And some of you have this, I think this is great, the SharePoint site, a database of class materials across the department. So I think it's really helpful not only to see past presentations like class presentations, assignments, syllabi, exams from the specific class you're teaching, but also from other classes that are kind of happening outside of the class that you're teaching. As Lacey mentioned, in order to kind of get best practices and really understand what is working, what doesn't. And I think, you know, when you go to like create your own syllabus and you're an adjunct and maybe you're a subject matter expert, but you haven't taught a class before, you don't really know like what is the appropriate number of assignments? What, you know, how many quizzes should I have? You know, how long does a presentation take? How long do you have to keep for in-class discussion? So some of these questions that, again, I think seem like second nature to people who have been doing this a while, having a shared database that has some of this already there would be extremely helpful for us in-person adjuncts at KOGAD. And Beverly, I have one more slide here. And then those are kind of from the you know, resource perspective. And I think as far as the way that staff and people, faculty can kind of help our in-person adjuncts at KOGAD. I think that, again, this is being done and it would be really helpful for us to have a faculty member, a mentor, whether it's one mentor across all adjuncts, like a program director, or a one-to-one, as some of you have mentioned, but really that go-to person. Ideally, I think that is a professor that is familiar with the adjunct perspective and is kind of doing it. So when a cheating situation comes up, they may then shoot an email to all the other adjuncts and say, I just went through this. I thought it'd be helpful for you to understand this is how I addressed it, right? Or I'm about to submit my ASAC request. Just a reminder, you might want to do that too. So, you know, a mentor who can kind of be there to do those everyday situations, but also to provide ongoing guidance. And I think Jeremy mentioned this. I think if their goals are aligned with providing that guidance, it's also important. So the course coordinators, maybe their goal is to coordinate across sections, but if this person's, one of their goals is to really make that adjunct feel welcome and to be part of the process, I think that's really important as well. And then I think some of the other recommendations I have here are on the administrative side. If there was an administrator to help facilitate the onboarding and to maybe do some of these duties that would reduce the time commitment across the board for adjuncts, I think that would be really, really welcomed by adjunct faculty. And then having additional networking opportunities like these monthly teacher roundtables or just happy hours that other adjuncts can meet with one another and also meet with other full-time faculty, I think would be really welcomed as well. So those were some of my recommendations kind of based on crowdsourcing and my own experience. And I think the great news is that we are doing a lot of it here at KOGAD, which Laura is going to talk about right now. And we're also doing it across so many other departments, which has been great to hear about as well. So from there, I'm going to hand it over to Laura.
All right, thank you guys. Good afternoon. My name is Flor Lubin. I'm the Assistant Director of Faculty Support for KOGAD's online programs. I have recently joined the faculty as well as an adjunct in the marketing department. You know, I want to thank everyone for allowing me a few moments to overview the principles that inform KOGAD's approach to supporting the success of faculty members teaching in our online programs. I'm going to put on my human resources development hat for much of this conversation, but don't be surprised if I switch in between my administrator and faculty hats as well. Just know that it's all fluid to me, so feel free to ask questions at the designated time. You know, onboarding is often confused with orientation, but if there's one thing that I could clarify by the end of my time here with you today, it would be that orientation is a transaction, and it mainly involves completion of paperwork needed to register as a new employee and documentation of required training. Here at AU, there's very little in terms of required training for the faculty body. The expectation here, and at many universities to be fair, is that a faculty member has the needed academic credentials, and by virtue of those credentials are qualified or otherwise ready to teach in the classroom. What is unfortunately missed is that the faculty body serves a purpose that goes beyond teaching, and it becomes my responsibility as the Assistant Director of Faculty Support to advocate for an onboarding process that reflects the true nature of faculty work here in KOGOD's virtual spaces. So this brief overview will explore how KOGOD online programs build a culture, or is attempting to build up its culture of onboarding, and how we set our faculty up for success by helping them create a sense of identity in their new positions. Beverly, if you would proceed to the next slide. So there are some factors that should be known about our program and our faculty. First and foremost, our online programs are hosted in conjunction with an online program manager, which is also known as an OPM, which for us is 2U. Their role is to market the programs, recruit, counsel through the admission process, and enroll students. They also provide the software and tech support that is needed for the program, in addition to assisting faculty in designing quality online courses. And I put my little air quotes up because it's an ongoing conversation with our partners. Their priorities are extremely different than ours here in the program. And if there's enough time, perhaps maybe I can touch a little bit more on that. Secondly, our programs follow a master course structure, which is not different from what I heard from CAS and from other individuals speaking today. But it essentially means that a faculty member, and at times a faculty team, depending on the content that's needed for a course, designs the course and then copies that exact course section off and assigned to other faculty members to teach. And this is where the 3 buckets that you see on your screen right now comes into being. We have our course creators, they're creating the courses. We've got our course coordinators, they're revising the courses over time and supervising the 3rd bucket, which are our section leaders who are teaching those copied courses that I mentioned a little bit ago. Our section leaders are typically part-time faculty members. However, a full-time faculty member can also teach a section of a course. Furthermore, one faculty member can be associated with multiple buckets. What's most interesting about our section leaders is their bucket can be further distilled into 2 sub-buckets. New section leaders, who are individuals who are teaching with our programs for the first time, and then our returning section leaders, meaning that they have taught at least 2 semesters within the program. So I'll ask that you guys kind of think of it this way. Some of our faculty members are on campus. Some of our faculty members are near campus. Some of our faculty members may never step foot on campus. Most of our faculty members are full-time practitioners in their fields of expertise. And for other faculty members, AU is their main place of employment. And somehow I've got to be able to respond to the same question for all 3 of these buckets. How do I create a culture of success and support for each of these faculty members? Beverly, next slide. So at the top of the segment, I explained that orientation and onboarding is often used interchangeably. And I argued that this should not be. And now is a good time for me to further clarify on that statement. When we think about this from human resources development, onboarding is defined as the process of familiarizing an employee with the organization. Technically speaking, onboarding begins from the moment an offer is made to an employee until the time the employee becomes a productive member of the organization. So I view my work contribution from a human talent development lens. Therefore, my belief is that onboarding does not end, but rather functions on a continuum. And much of the literature on talent development tends to agree with my sentiment. This lens informs my approach to the faculty development aspect of what I do, especially in the areas of teaching online. So to make this easy to see and recall, I've nicknamed the approach OARS. And one of the things that you will note about me is that I love to use little nicknames and acronyms in order to get my point across. So yes, I do want you to think of the paddle used to steer a rowboat through water, and more importantly, as a tool that drives that rowboat forward, right? So when we think about oars, it's really about encompassing the needed tools to start and keep a new faculty member on the right path, and also faculty members who are returning. So when I talk about orientation, again, the transactional completion of paperwork needed to register as a new employee, and documentation of that required training. There's also this idea of acclimation, getting a faculty member accustomed to a new climate or to new conditions in a familiar space. There's the idea of retention, which is about maintaining faculty engagement in the vision, mission, and values of our organization in order to prevent turnover wherever possible. And then finally, there's this idea of support. So we need to be able to share resources, information, common commitments, common challenges, even in addition to a focus on personal and professional wellness as faculty members engage their roles. So what I'd like to move on to is to discuss what this continuum looks like in the faculty onboarding process for KOGOD online programs. So Beverly, if you would. Thank you. So what you're looking at here on the screen is, again, a breakdown of ORs. And so when we talk about orientation, again, that required documented training. So this usually involves our start of term meeting, where I essentially lead 2 45-minute opportunities. It's the same meeting, just hosted at different times for scheduling convenience for faculty members to gain a sense of what to know for the start of term, to include the academic calendar, tips to starting the semester off on a strong footing with your students, etc. First-time section leaders are required to attend this session. For returning faculty members, this meeting is optional. However, the recording is distributed in this start of term email that's also listed on the screen. And at the end of term, we send out reminders to faculty members regarding grade submissions, administering the set, and other closeout announcements that's important to that administrative aspect that everyone's been alluding to. The next part of this orientation piece is around 2U technology training. This is also required for first-time faculty members. It informs faculty members as to how to navigate the virtual environment that is so vital to everything that a faculty member is going to do throughout the term. Moving on into acclimation, these are just mechanisms that are intended to help faculty members familiarize themselves with AU and the KOGOD environment that they will be maneuvering during their time with us. Those two factors are our faculty coordinators. So those faculty members who are updating the master course while also providing guidance and oversight to faculty members teaching a section within the program. We also have what was developed in October of 2020. It is referred to as FOR, again, having fun with acronyms. It stands for Faculty Online Resources in Education. It is an online course where each module is dedicated to a specific faculty bucket. It is hosted in our 2U platform, and I'll expand a little bit more on FOR when we move to the next slide. For the last aspect, or the next aspect of this, retention. I look at these as opportunities to keep our faculty members engaged with the university, KOGOD, and specifically our online programs. There's this idea of a coaching and feedback loop where our coordinators are absolutely pivotal. As a self-critique, because while much is done, it is never foolproof. We're still not using this opportunity to its fullest potential. Essentially, as of now, this opportunity is mainly when a student concern arises, where the course coordinator and myself will be in communications as to what is needed to support that specific faculty member based on the nature of the concern that has come up. In the areas of teaching and learning, we often provide advice and strategies that faculty can elect to adopt or adapt. However, it is useful for retention in that a faculty member can receive real-time feedback as opposed to summative feedback that comes along with the sets. Furthermore, the feedback we provide is grounded in online teaching and learning best practices. So faculty members have a space to grow in their teaching experiences, because that's also important. While adjunct faculty members are giving back, we also want to be sure that they have what it is that they need to be the best faculty member that they could be. With this past year, I want to say it took place between May to July of 2021. I instituted a faculty development series, which was intended to be by faculty for faculty. In our 2021 trial, we selected 4 different topics that were hosted over 4 months that a coordinator or section leader could host. Some of those topics included teacher presence in online classrooms and academic integrity in online spaces. And its purpose was to really foster a culture of continuous learning and give opportunities for faculty members to meet each other. And then every year, or every academic term, we usually start off with an all online faculty meeting. It's an annual meeting, happens every October, and corresponds to, what can we do to make this space better for faculty members? What can we do to really promote this idea of teaching and learning and engaging? So at that meeting, we tend to provide a keynote speaker. The topic is usually around teaching and learning. In 2020, we had DEI as our topic. In 2021, we discussed the 2U learning experience framework. And we also invited the AU-ASAC to discuss the changing nature of accommodations. Additionally, this meeting also discusses the health of our programs and any information that all online faculty at KOGOD should be aware of as we kick off a new academic year. And then finally, there are support structures in place for our online programs. It includes myself, I'm a one-woman band here, as KSB faculty support, both in the creation of courses, faculty development, and overall best practices in online education. And it is a joint effort between myself and KOGOD's instructional designer. There is 2U faculty support, which is supposed to be 24/7, 365 for technology issues and concerns. But as you would hear from some of our faculty members, there is much in the room of improvement that can come from that end. And then finally, we do strongly encourage our online faculty members to attend AU CTRL sessions whenever possible. Of course, because many of our faculty members are full-time professionals, they often cannot participate as regularly as we would want them to in the hours in which CTRL sessions are held, which conflicts with their work obligations. However, we do ask that they visit the CTRL YouTube website in order to view recordings of sessions they may have missed if it's available. This process overall is under continuous review and survey. We ask all of our faculty members to let us know what they need, how we can improve. And while we can't do everything our faculty members desire, we are responsive in what we can actually do. So despite this process, the real key element of supporting the success of faculty members is being as open and having doors open as much as possible and an open mind, never really believing that because a process is working, that there's no room for improvement. And so Beverly, if you would, the last slide. So to kind of close out my brief overview, I wanted to highlight what I consider the crown jewel of our onboarding process, and that is FOR. On the surface, FOR has 3 main purposes that can be immediately seen by faculty. The first of which is to build a culture of training and development, while establishing a baseline of comprehension of the functions associated with the multiple faculty buckets in our programs. So as Anjali was alluding to, it does also provide a centralized hub of information and continuous development for B.Ed.A. faculty. And then the last point under this is Its purpose is to assist and guide course creators, course coordinators, and section leaders as they acclimate to KOGOD's online programs, becoming more aware of best practices relating to online teaching. But there is one hidden element of Flor that makes it intriguing, and that is it literally mimics the online course experience of our student body. The literature around this is clear. Many faculty members who teach online have never been a student online. So how can we expect faculty members to empathize with our students' experiences if they themselves haven't had the experiences of learning virtually? So this course not only provides information as to what faculty members should know about the university, about KOGOD, about the online programs, but for course creators, it gives them an idea as to what a quality course should look like. It gives our course coordinators an opportunity to see how to leverage the new technologies our OPM partners are rolling out. And it gives our section leaders an idea as to what students must do in order to navigate the LMS, because they have also navigated the LMS as a student. And with that, that concludes my brief overview. I thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you, Laura. So we have some time, I believe we're till 12:40. So we have some time and we wanted to keep some time for some Q&A. So if you all have any questions and or thoughts based on what we have been talking about today, we would love to hear from you or answer any questions that might have. You can put them in the chat. Sorry, till 12:35 we go. We can put them in the chat, or you can raise your hand as well. Did anyone have anything they wanted to maybe contribute and or ask? One thing I was thinking kind of as Laura was speaking, and I think a lot of us kind of mentioned this, is there is this idea that you feel like you have these questions and you don't want to continually be sending these one-off emails to, I know my first semester, it was like continually sending it to our course coordinator, and you feel bad, and you realize that they are under a lot of, they have all these other obligations as well. So I think the more that we can have resources in place that adjuncts can kind of reference, whether it's sample situations and or tasks and how you go through them will be helpful. Don't be shy. Come on, you guys are all, usually we're encouraging our students to not be shy and contribute. So does anyone have anything, or maybe it's lunchtime? And everyone
I want to just jump in with one thing really quick that just occurred to me as you were talking just now. One of the things as a program director, I do want adjunct faculty going to their mentors and going to the resources and all of that, but I also really, really do want them coming to me, especially if there's a problem. And I think fostering kind of communication and support so that the adjunct faculty feel they can come to us is crucial, right? Because if there's a problem and they don't come to me, the worst thing is when I find out about it from a dean or somebody like that, where something is, escalated and become a real problem. I'd rather know right away, and let's deal with it, and I'm not going to hold it against you. And so I think cultivating it on both sides, I think is super important, right? The sort of peer kind of mentoring and connections and networking and all of that, but also the open lines of communication with the director, with the supervisor, so that when there are trouble spots, we can actually address them early before they become big trouble spots.
Absolutely. Mark, did you have a question or thought?
Yeah, sorry. I think it's a great set of presentations. I really appreciate all the information. One thing that struck me, particularly in Anjali's and Laura's presentation, was, the difference between the adjunct experience in different schools, right? I mean, there's obviously differences with their backgrounds, but like Anjali mentioned in hers, well, most adjuncts do this. Most are working 40 hours a week, and most have done this, and in other professional lives. Well, that's probably actually not true of all schools, right? And certainly the support that we have in the online program, our designated online program, is much more sophisticated than anything we've developed with the campus program, right? Where the goal, frankly, of a lot of schools is not to have a lot of adjuncts, right? Which is different maybe from Lacey's writing program, things like that. So I would love to hear more about the things I don't know as much about, which are the adjunct experiences from outside professional schools. So I was just trying to add a question onto that, but it's partly just an observation.
I mean, I think that for me, one of the things to really keep in mind, since that is the bulk of my adjunct faculty, most of my adjunct faculty want to be writing teachers, right? That's the career they want. And so they may do other work to make ends meet, but what they want to be doing is teaching. And that's their primary thing. So I think that this idea of support and ongoing development tends against really keeping an eye out at every moment for places where we might drift into exploitation. I think is important. I think for people who are extraordinarily low paid, who may be teaching at multiple institutions, who really are struggling financially, I think we have an obligation to protect them, and look in their best interests. And so I think for me, the material circumstances become a much larger deal for the types of adjunct faculty that I'm working with. The stakes are always higher for them, and so I think it's really important to always keep that as an operating principle in mind with them. It is very different from somebody who has a living wage and they're doing this because they want to as a side gig.
I would actually add on to that, Lacey. Mark, we always have interesting discussions, don't we? So I think there's a couple of things that needs to be recognized across the board. While many universities may not want to have many adjuncts, that is the direction that we're moving in, simply because of so many other conversations within higher ed, right? This idea of the commoditization of knowledge and et cetera, et cetera. So it brings me back to what Lacey was saying before, which is that we really should not be viewing our adjunct faculty members as separate or other. We really need to start accommodating them and incorporating them into our university fabric wherever we possibly could. The fact is, universities may not want adjuncts, but you need them. So if you had them as a resource, the least we could be doing is everything we possibly can to support that resource while they're with us. So that would be my response to what you said.
I agree. And Lacey also said, and they're valuable teachers and scholars. One more question that we have. I mean, you're welcome to, we have a couple of minutes left. Let me just go back here. Robert had a question on how you have gathered best practices from your faculty. Is that a standardized process? Is that more of an informal process? Anybody want to jump in on that?
I'd be happy to kind of lead that off. So remember how we started this Q&A section by saying, hey, don't be shy. Everyone kind of jump in, and it might be survey fatigue. But when I first started in this role, I started to send out surveys to all of our faculty buckets to kind of garner some ideas around, what would you be interested in seeing? What type of sessions could I actually host for you that you feel would be beneficial? And if I got 3 responses, that was great. So I guess what I'm essentially saying is that, it would be awesome if we could collapse all the information from adjunct faculty members as to what we could do to better support them, but that also requires some participation from the faculty side as well. And so as long as we maintain those open doors and open lines of communication and the administration is offering you an opportunity to give them that feedback, then kind of give them that feedback when you have that opportunity. And so that would be my my little plug there. I'm sure other people on the panel probably have other aspects as to how they go about collecting, but I tried to formalize it and it didn't exactly work the way I expected.
We've struggled a little bit with that too. I think not quite as much. One thing we do is we do have an adjunct faculty representative to our monthly meetings. And I've increasingly tried to encourage that person to be kind of a voice for adjunct faculty, to do some collection of concerns and things like that. You know, it's had mixed success. You know, people are overburdened. I don't want to put more burdens on them. In terms of collecting things to put in resources for faculty, that we tend to do through our mentoring committee, which Jeremy is on. We will reach out to faculty directly and try to get a diversity of faculty perspectives and say, hey, would you mind sharing your materials for Writing 100? We'd really love to put them into this, you know, bank. And we do that because we're familiar with each other's, you know, kinds of approaches and all that. That allows us to create a bank of resources that represents some diversity of pedagogical perspectives, as well as faculty with different levels of experience. So that's coordinated, but not coordinated by me. I'm involved in that process. It's coordinated by this faculty committee. And when you ask people directly, hey, could you share your materials? We'd love to add them. In general, they're going to say yes. You know, I've occasionally they will say no, but almost never. And so in terms of putting together stuff that we can share, that has actually been a pretty easy process. And we also, I should add too, just as a side note, we've actually, one of our faculty members developed a set of permissions based on, what's that sort of general permissions? Jeremy, do you remember what it's called? I always forget.
Yeah, the Creative Commons.
Yeah, based on Creative Commons practices. So we have a permissions form that goes with each set of materials. You know, can it be adapted? Do you want credit? Can they take exact copies of stuff? And so we want to protect the agency of those faculty who are sharing things too. And that just all becomes part of our resource site, those permissions too. Yeah, it's pretty sophisticated, and it's not me who did it. It's the faculty in our program who did it. So, and it works really well.
I also think when you have these informal networking and or formal networking that we're talking about, you know, these roundtables, happy hours, or anything, when people are given a chance to just share, that's when a lot of these best practices come together, right? Or you can learn and you can hear what the struggles are, what the challenges are, and also what's working really well when you're in a setting where you're all kind of sharing together, I would imagine. And I think you brought another point.
I'm sorry.
Oh,
no, just letting you folks know that we have 3 more minutes left in the session.
Lacey, that was actually a question I know some of the adjuncts mentioned to me when we were chatting. What are people willing to share and not share? So putting together a SharePoint, I think, or, you know, I think for us, asking somebody like, can I see your slides, or can I see your exam? Can I see your syllabus? We don't know if that's okay, not okay, who's willing to do it, who's not. So if there is a shared resource where people can go knowing that it's already there and not having to ask, I think that's helpful.
I think it's made a huge difference. And also just in terms of kind of standardizing what we allow people get control over their own intellectual property through this system too. And that matters also.
I would love to see what you guys have put together, Lacey, because as part of Flor, I do have a section within that course that talks about a faculty learning commons in there. So if that is something that you guys have and are willing to share with me, I would love to see how I can implement it over here in the online programs as well.
Yeah, I've made a note to send you a link.
Thank you.
Is there any other closing comments? I would like to say I appreciate being able to have a voice as an adjunct and to kind of share the adjunct perspective. So thank you to Parthiban, and thank you to everyone for allowing me and us adjuncts to be able to do that. I think it's helpful.
Yeah, thank you everyone for participating and coming in and sharing experiences. I think it's been super helpful for us to learn what we're doing well and what we need to do better as we try to support the adjunct faculty. Thank you.
All right, bye now. Take care.
All right. And with that, before you all go, I just wanted to say that we have I just wanted to say thank you for joining us for this session. Before you leave, please take a brief moment to fill out the anonymous evaluation survey that we just posted in the chat. In a brief moment, I will share my screen, and you will also be able to see a QR code, which you can scan on your phone if you prefer to do it like that. These surveys help CTRL improve our programming and better serve faculty. So any feedback you can provide is greatly appreciated. Thank you once again for the presenters. They did an excellent job. It was very informative, and I really think they did a wonderful, I learned a lot. Here we go.
And Gavin, can you maybe hit enter? The link's not in the chat yet. Thank you.